Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, everyone. So we are talking about the news of the day, which is NATO first strike has been confirmed. NATO are talking about first strikes into Russia amid a stream of hybrid warfare. And yes, guys, people are talking about nuclear retaliation, nuclear options. So before we get into this, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you like, comment, subscribe if you've not done so already. It really helps me out when you guys do that. Let me turn the chat on. Yeah, we've got the chat on. Right, without further ado, guys, listen, I have got quite a lot to get through. So the first part of this live stream, we're going to be focusing on NATO proposing preemptive strikes on Russia, the Russian response, how that's going to affect people in the United Kingdom, how I think World War III will start. And you know what? Since I've been talking about this, how I personally think this will start, I've actually noticed other people saying that this could start the same way, because now we've taken out any margin for error, whereas before, like a couple of, I don't know, months, maybe even years ago, actually, if a Russian aircraft flew in somebody's airspace, they would say, oh, well, it was a mistake, their GPS went down or whatever. Now there is no room for error, guys. There's absolutely no room for error. So I'm just going to get into this. I'll jump onto the chat. Then we'll come on to things that have been happening in the United Kingdom. I've got a few videos to share with you guys. I've got Tommy Robinson video. I've got Donald Trump videos. I've got and just before we get on, actually, I'll give you guys some statistics, right? You have to earn in the United Kingdom right now. I'm going to come on to this after I've given you guys my opening monologue, but I thought I'd just get this out there in the first place. You have to earn, if you live in the United Kingdom right now, you have to earn £71,000 to match the income of somebody that's that's jobless and has 3 children. So if you want to earn the equivalent of £71,000, don't get a job, just bang out 3 kids and stay at home with them. You get the same, you get the same reward. Unbelievable. Right, let me jump onto this, guys, because if you guys want to check this article out, this is an article from the article I'm talking about is NATO. I'm not going to share it with you guys because it's just like full of ads everywhere. But this is from an article from that I read this morning, The Independent. It was released 2nd of December at 04:30. NATO considering preemptive action against Russia's hybrid warfare attacks. The chair of NATO Military Committee says more aggressive approach may be needed to deter Putin. So I'm not going to share that article with you guys, but if you guys want to go and look at that article, that's fine. I've done a little bit of digging about this, but so December 2025, where we are right now, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to December 2025. NATO has publicly discussed the possibility of preemptive or proactive strikes, proactive measures against Russia. That's what they're saying now. They're saying this openly. If they're saying it openly, it means they're not just saying it right now. They're not just thinking it. That's how things work, guys, okay? So when you're in these high echelons of power and you're sat there in your big fancy chair, I can only assume it's like a leather Chesterfield and it smells of like, deep mahogany, and you release something to the public. You've already talked about that in closed doors. You've got those plans. I used to do this as a job, guys, okay? Behind the scenes, maybe months ago, somebody will have said to one of their strategic planners or one of their tactical guys, right, what are our strike options? What are our preemptive options against Russia? That will all be laid out in a plan. That will have all been war gamed. It will have all been war gamed with AI. And they will say, right, okay, we'll announce it to the public now and make it look like we're just announcing it for the first time. But this will have been long in the planning, guys, okay? So NATO are announcing preemptive or proactive, they're calling them measures, but they're going to be strikes against Russia in response to the escalating wave of hybrid warfare. This includes cyber attacks, sabotage options such as arson, infrastructure disruptions. Remember, we spoke about this before. It's system. They're trying to achieve system destruction. whereby the Russians or whoever, you know, it doesn't really matter who it is, they're in the United Kingdom, they're in Poland, they're in Germany, wherever, and they are actively setting fire to stuff that's important to that war effort. There's also been airspace violations by Russian drones across Europe. The Italian General Giuseppe Cavo, the NATO's supreme allied commander, stated in a Financial Times interview that the NATO alliance is studying more aggressive tactics, explicitly mentioning preemptive strikes. Now, that's what he said, guys, not me. I didn't say that. He said that, and he's like, you know, he's an Italian admiral, so he loves his coffee and he loves his tactics. Obviously, these preemptive strikes would be to counter the threats that we before they materialize. So what they're saying there is, you know, if we see a threat approaching, we're going to neutralize that threat before it has a chance to attack us. He emphasized such attacks or such actions as defensive under NATO's doctrine. Now, I don't think the Russians will see this as defensive. You know, we can all say we're being defensive while we're fighting. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. It's just the way we go. And he's arguing that that the hybrid attacks are already constituting aggression against NATO countries and they warrant retaliation. This remark shifts from NATO's traditional reactive posture, which would be driven by incidents like drone incursions over Poland or the Baltics, as well as the cyber disruptions in Estonia and Germany. And again, you know, I would say that there's a lot more cyber attacks coming into the United Kingdom that we just don't hear about now. I mean, how often do our payment apps go down on our phones? How often does the network go down? And I would say this is all part of cyber. I would say this is all part of cyber warfare, although I can't confirm that. Russia has condemned these remarks. So here's where it gets interesting, guys. So now the Russians are. So this is the Russians' response to what NATO have been saying. Russia has condemned these remarks, obviously, as irresponsible and escalatory, with Kremlin spokeswoman, she's a woman, guys, she's a woman. Kremlin spokeswoman Maria Zakharova warning that any preemptive action could trigger a decisive response, including nuclear options, if perceived as an existential threat. Now, I'm going to finish this monologue, and then at the end, guys, I'm going to give you guys, and you know, I've given you guys this for quite a while. I've said this for quite a few times. My stance on nuclear weapons hasn't changed, but if there's anyone watching for the first time and you're hearing this, I will give you my understanding of this and what I think will happen with regards to these nuclear weapons. Yeah, so she said basically any attacks would trigger a decisive response, including nuclear options, if perceived as an existential threat. President Vladimir Putin echoed this, stating that Russia would only retaliate after confirming an imminent attack, but would ensure annihilation of the aggressor. There's been a lot of posts around, guys, with people speculating on black swan events or system reset via a war. And others, and I have noticed this more, guys, others have started to say the risk of accidental war from an error. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to tell you how I think this will start. And again, it's not changed. I've been saying the same thing. I'm not looking at the information now and changing my mind. I've been telling you guys how I think World War III will start. I've been saying for a while how I think it will start. We had a perfect example of how it could have gone very wrong in the Baltics, I think, last year. But let me continue, because this gets more complicated now. It does. And the room for error is very thin. So I just want to throw some context here of the invocation of Article 4. So hang on, I think I'm going to... It's usually 3. No, it's not 1. It's not 1. Yes? No? I think it's just 1. Yeah, it's just 1. Yeah, it's just 1. So, for those of you who don't know, there's Article 4 of the NATO Treaty allows any member state to request... I think it's 2. It might be 3. I don't know. I think it's 2. So, we all know what, you know, I don't know if people understand this or not, but NATO is a group of countries and they've all got these rules and regulations and treaties. The reason NATO was formed, it was to counter Russian aggression after the Second World War. Now, there's a series of articles in that. Everybody talks about Article 5, and that Article 5 is going to be a military response, and an attack against one member state is deemed an attack against all member states. That's fine, but trust me, guys, it's not worth the paper it's written on. Article 5, anyway. Article 4, the one before that, of the NATO treaty allows any member state to request consultation if it perceives threats to its territorial integrity, political independence, or security. It does not automatically trigger military action, though. So what Article 4 basically does is gets everybody around the table. For example, you know, what if the United Kingdom called out, you know, said, listen, I need to call Article 4 here because we're worried about our, our integrity. We're worried about a threat to our nation. We're worried about whatever, you know, all the NATO members get round, they sit round a table, you know, they've probably got some, you know, they've probably got some little bags of crisps and some water bottles or whatever, you know, and they all have a discussion about what are the likely threats and what response if those likely threats materialize. Now, once that's done and they've all signed off on it, they know what to do. So before NATO Article 4 has been invoked, that Polish pilot who's flying and, you know, he's up in the sky and he sees two Russian MiGs coming towards him or whatever, you know, or the blackjack bombers, and, you know, and they encroach into Polish airspace or whatever. Previously, he would have had to ask for permission. He'd be like, right, these guys are in Polish airspace. Can we shoot them down? And then that would have gone to a control room. And I would speculate, from my understanding of the military and how they work, nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to give that authority to shoot, like, you know, the colonel or the general that's in charge. They're going to be like, yeah, I'm not sure about this, guys. I'm not sure about this. They might be lost. But now Article 4 is being invoked. Those guys will have revised rules of engagement. So if those Russian aircraft come in this time, the Polish pilot, they're already briefed on what was spoken about in Article 4. They smoke those fools. They take them to the candy shop. You know, they don't need to have that communication back to. They don't need to have that communication now back to their command centers. Now, like I said before, the margin of error or miscalculation here, because those Russian pilots could genuinely be lost. Their GPS systems could have gone down. They could have taken some cyber attack from the Ukrainians, you know, and they've had to drop down to find some ground references, and they're trying to find their way back to a Russian base. And in that context, now World War III starts by accident. So I'm just going to give a little bit of, in 2025, there was a lot of invocations of Article 4. So we've got Poland, Estonia. This isn't this year alone. So we've got Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So September, Poland invoked Article 4. Multiple Russian drones were violating Polish airspace near the Ukrainian border. There was one that went deeper into Poland. This prompted NATO consultations, led into further air policing and forward deployments of the region. Like you see, guys, okay, we're seeing more of this movement forwards, and like I keep saying, I think this will start by accident. Then we have September again. Estonia invoked Article 4, escalating cyber intrusions and sabotage linked to Russian actors, including attacks on the energy grid. Does look like it's countrywide, guys. NATO-wide. Then we've got Latvia and Lithuania invoked on February. This was from heightened Russian naval activity in the Baltics and migrant weaponization attempts at their border. You know, I'm going to say that the migrants that we have coming over now, guys, it's all connected. It's all connected, guys. It's all part of subversion. It's a massive part of subversion. So these 2025 cases build on the prior ones. So in February, there was, I think it was Bulgaria, Czech Republic. I can't remember, in February 2022, when the initial Russian invasion, when the 2022 invasion of Ukraine happened, what was it? It was Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Poland, Romania, Slovakia. I can't remember, but Eastern European countries, they all invoked Article 4 immediately after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That led to NATO activating their response force. There was a major build-up on the eastern flank, and this is how we're seeing these things move forward. Now, the battlefield, I'm going to talk about what are the implications, what's the impact on the battlefield in Ukraine and wider Europe, I guess. So the rhetoric and Article 4 activity subtly but significantly alters the dynamics without direct NATO combat involvement, which I think is going to come, guys, at some point. Russia's hybrid campaign aimed at stretching NATO's responses. And remember, guys, we spoke about this before, that system destruction that they're trying to achieve. Now we're looking at NATO looking at preemptive countermeasures, which would be forcing Moscow to divert assets from Ukraine to defend against cyber or sabotage reprisals. Now, I'm not convinced on how NATO can sabotage. I'm not sure how NATO can send in preemptive sabotage strikes against Russia. I don't know, guys. They may use the same playbook. Do you know what? The NATO operatives online using cyber tactics, they may find people online, groom them online, and get them to go set fire to a substation and then pay them. That's and I've said this many times. The new dynamic of warfare is not going to be, when we talk about, there's going to have to be something else made up, because it's not going to be grey warfare. It's not going to be asymmetric warfare. It's going to be a new dynamic where you pay criminal gangs to go and do shit in the bad guys' countries. This would obviously have an effect in Donbass, potentially slowing down Russians by increasing logistic vulnerabilities, taking out those storage facilities. It would have an effect. But guys, listen, the Russians, they're moving forwards very slowly, but very surely, and each and every day the Russians are taking more and more ground in Ukraine. Ultimately, I think the best that we can hope for at the moment is just slowing down that move. However, risks, escalations could harden. These could harden Russia, and I think they would bring Russia together as well. If you guys think about the Second World War, when Germany started to bomb towns and cities in the United Kingdom, that brought people together rather than push people apart. It actually brought people together. So initially this buys Ukraine and buys NATO time, but there's no clear off ramp here, guys. There is no clear off ramp for me, as far as I'm understanding this situation in Ukraine, and I do understand it pretty comprehensively. I understand the situation pretty comprehensively. There's no off ramp. There's no off ramp. What do I mean by that? There's no point where, for example, the Ukrainians can say, right, if we can do this, we can have this. There's none of that. Likewise, for the Russians, as far as what are the Russian objectives? I don't know. What's a win for Russia? I don't know. What's a win for Ukraine? I don't know. And without these clear message statements, without these clear objectives, clear military objectives, it's very difficult to try and understand or try and see where the off ramp is. I've said many times that I don't think there's going to be any off ramp until the Russians get up to the River Dnipro. However, wider Europe, this shift of aggression amplifies deterrence but injects volatility. Article 4 invocations have solidified Europe's eastern flank. with battle groups in Poland, the Baltics. Now, you know, I don't even know what strength they are, but the strength is rising. You know, there's lots more people going out there. There's lots more assets being put in place, lots more drones being built, and that buildup is real. And they're all there to deter Russian incursions. Now, as far as the Russians are concerned, you've got to look at this from the other side, guys, okay? So you imagine you're sat there as a Russian now, you're looking, the Russians are looking, and the Russians are seeing this military buildup. They're seeing loads of military turn up, and the Russian media is full of, I don't know what the Russian media are saying, obviously. 100,000 NATO troops on the border, ready to go in, or whatever they're saying. You know, you can see both propaganda, both countries pushing propaganda out there. You know, oh, those guys are bad. No, those guys are bad. The inevitable's coming. So yes, it heightens World War III fears. It does, guys. It absolutely heightens World War III fears. It, you know, it increases the risk of this starting by accident through miscalculation. And I do think Europe is facing an absolute blowback right now of cyber attacks, sabotage, and migrant surges. Yeah, I'm saying it, guys, migrant surges. I do think these migrant surges are part of this asymmetric warfare or non-conventional warfare. I do. I don't see any other way that this can happen. Remember, if you want to subvert a country, and I believe the United Kingdom has been subverted for a long time, you know, this is a long process, but once it's done, it's very difficult to, you know, it's very difficult to unravel. Right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about the confirmed news this morning, guys. The confirmed news. The Russians are talking about nuclear options. NATO are talking about first strike options. And I'm going to tell you right now, and then I'm going to jump onto the chat. I'm going to tell you guys right now how I think World War III will start. Remember, World War IV has already started, guys, all right? World War IV is on the ground in the United Kingdom. So back in, I can't remember the dates. I think it was last summer. So I'm going to say like June, July time. Last summer in the Baltics, there was an incident involving a German helicopter and a Russian warship. Now, this incident, there was a Russian warship and a German helicopter that, you know, was perceivably flying close. I don't know how close it was. And the Russian warship fired a signal flare in the direction of that helicopter. Now, this is exactly the type of miscalculation or accidental incident that's going to happen, that's going to trigger World War III. All right. So just put this into context now. All right. Put this into context now. The Russian warship, right? You're on the Russian warship, and the captain tells the gunner on. Guys, listen. I don't know how these things are structured, but you know, you're just going to have to, you know. So if there's anybody out there says, "Oh, Sean, it wouldn't be the gunner who would do it," that okay, right, whatever. So just consider this, guys. Okay, consider this. You're the Russian warship, right? The captain or admiral or whoever's in charge. He's there with his binoculars. He's looking on his binoculars, and he gives an order on the thing. He says, "Right, everybody, change all your ammunition to signal flares. I want everybody in the machine guns to have signal flares or whatever they is, cannons or whatever. I don't know, you know." But on one of those guns, Yuri, all right, Yuri was at the toilet. He had his earphones in. He was looking at his phone or whatever. He didn't hear that command. He comes back out. He thinks nothing of it. You know, he thinks nothing of it. After an hour, he gets relieved of his position. So he's having his dinner, or he's going for his dinner now. Now, Yuri, who was supposed to change the ammunition from, I don't know, 12.7 millimeter to, I don't know, signal flares or whatever it is, he was on the toilet, all right? Now he's eating his dinner. And somebody else is on that gun. The German helicopter comes in and the captain shouts, "Open fire, right, somebody fire a shot at that helicopter." The captain The captain thinks that all the guns have signal flares in them now because he's told everybody he's given that order. But guess what? Yuri's in the toilet. He didn't get that message. The new person on the gun, he thinks that in that gun, you know, they're signal flares. And I get it, guys. You know, somebody's going, oh, but Sean, there'll be checks and balances. You can see signal flares. I'm just giving you guys an example of how things could happen by accident. So then, you know, Vasnia, he fires 2 rounds at the helicopter, and he realizes that it's, you know, it's not signal flare, so he stops. Doesn't matter, guys, because guess what? One of those rounds hits the German helicopter. Now, because Article 4 has already been invoked, that helicopter pilot, they don't need to ask permission to return fire. They don't need to ask permission for anything. All they do is hit a button and everybody goes into autopilot. The next thing that happens, the German or the Polish helicopter, whatever it is, they fire at the ship. The ship's sunk. The ship gives a mayday. On its last, you know, as the ship's sinking, it fires off a shit ton of missiles. Now you've got a German base destroyed or a Polish base destroyed. The Polish see this as a, you know, as a preemptive strike. The Russians see this as a preemptive strike to World War III. So everybody, guys, listen, you have no idea the amount of violence that can be issued in 30 minutes. The first thing we would know is that we're already in it. You know, the mass casualties. It's already happened. There's no stopping it now. Both sides would be pointing the fingers at each other. You know, both sides, they'd be pointing the fingers at each other. You know, these small, because we're so tense now, I think World War III will start by accident, guys. I really do. I think it will start by it will start by accident. Right, also, with the nuclear threats, guys, okay? With the nuclear threats, right? I've given you guys my opinion and how and when, what would need to happen before a nuclear weapon would strike. I've said this quite a few times, guys. I'm not going to go into it now. I don't personally think a nuclear weapon is ever going to be used ever again. Ever, 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 ever. My reasoning for that is a bit wild, guys, so I'm not going to go into that now. What I will say is, if anyone's going to use a nuclear weapon, if anyone, I mean the United States, I mean Russia, there's going to be a series of tests. There's going to be a build-up phase, because counter to popular belief, it's not that easy to get one of these things to detonate. It's not that easy, you know. First of all, you've got the mushroomy bit, you know, the kaboomy bit. They are very difficult to get all those things to hit that. I think it's called critical mass. So first of all, there's a lot of technology and a lot of engineering that actually goes into that nuclear weapon. Then you've got to put that on a delivery system. So now you've got to put that onto a missile or something. So, you know, these things are not as easy to, you know, they're not as, you can't just pull them off the shelf and stick it in, you know, stick it in a, I don't know, stick it in the cannon or whatever and fire it off. Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to get some comments on the chat. And then I will come on to what's happening in the United Kingdom. I've got a few videos to share with you guys as well. But the leading article from this, guys, is from The Independent this morning. NATO considering preemptive strike against Russia. That's the article from this morning. Sorry. They're calling it preemptive action. Sorry, not strike. I do this thing where I look at the words and I think I read it before I've read it. Now, this comes as the chair of the NATO Military Committee says a more aggressive approach is needed. This is an article out this morning, Tuesday, the 2nd of December, 2025. The Russians are responding by saying that they will take all, what's her name? Maria Zakharova. Maria Zakharova is warning that any preemptive action could trigger a decisive response including nuclear options. That's what she's saying, guys. That's what she's saying in Russia. I'm not saying this. You know, this is not me making clickbait. That's what she's saying. That's what NATO is saying. That's what she's saying. That is an article that you guys can read yourself. I'm not going to share it because there's like ads everywhere. That's an article this morning from The Independent. NATO considering preemptive action against Russia, released Tuesday, 2nd of December, 2025 at 04:30 GMT. Right, where are we, guys? Where are we? Right, Donna. I'm going to get Donna first. I'm going to get Donna's first. Where's Donna? Where's Donna's things? Debbie Doobs is saying. Debbie Doobs is saying sanctions don't work. They don't work. They don't work, guys. Sanctions just make us all poorer. Just collate all the evidence. We are FUBAR. There's so many data points, and I think people are. You know, I think people get numb to the data points. You know, like if you live in the United Kingdom, you get numb to the gangs that are cruising around doing things to girls and, you know, just like crazy stuff that's happening. Oh, hang on. Hang on. I've got something here. I may have something here. I may have something for you guys. Hang on. Wow. So okay, so one of my Ukrainian friends has just sent me this. You know, I'll come back onto that because I before I say that, I want to find it if I can get this on a mainstream media on online actually, because I don't want to say that just yet. But yeah, there's lots of data, all these data points, you know, that are pushing in, and because it's happening slowly and slowly. Look, guys, we all thought that, you know, I mean, I guess if you went back to the Second World War, like to 1938 or something, or 1936, I guess, like the build up to the Second World War, I would say started in 1936 with the Spanish Civil War. And, you know, not many people talk about this. So the Spanish Civil War, you know, the Germans, the first conflict that the German military was in was the Spanish Civil War in 1936, and nobody talks about this. And I would say that was the build-up to World War III, and as we all know, World War IV started. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is, you know, World War II, you know, could be argued that it actually started in 1936 because that's when, you know, the conflict started. Chris is saying they can't win. Okay, so I think what Chris means here is, I think what Chris is talking about, I think what Chris is saying is the Ukrainians can't win. And where I agree with Chris 100%, the Ukrainians can't beat the Russians. What I'm just going to say is, and not really to play devil's advocate, but just to like, what does a win mean for Ukraine? And what does a win mean for Russia? Because, you know, without understanding, like, I mean, that should be like, if you go into any negotiation, you want to know what the other side wants, right? You want to know what the other side wants. Now, if the Russians say that they just want the ground that they've got, why are they moving forwards, right? As for, you know, and for the Ukrainians, I can only assume the Ukrainians want a return to 2013 borders. So, you know, but without that official, doctrine, it's very difficult to understand what they're talking about. Donna is saying World War III. Yeah, I think I've just given. Yeah. So this is what I'm talking. Yeah. This is what I'm talking about. This is obviously what I'm talking about. Yeah. Oh, this is going crackers, guys. Sorry. Give me a second, guys. Give me a second. I need to respond to this. Sorry, guys. I've got stuff coming in. Sorry. Right. Okay, so let me jump down to the bottom, guys, because there's quite a lot of comments on here. The argument that two parties should represent opposing ideals and policies, one perhaps of the right and one of the left, is a foolish idea, acceptable only by doctrine and academia. Okay, I like this. Thinkers, instead, the two parties should be almost identical so the American people can throw rascals out at any election. Okay, right. Ghost in the flesh. I don't know what that's in context to. I don't know what that's in context to, but okay. Donna is saying fill as much space as. All right, okay, right. Right. I think people are talking about how to proof your house against an explosion. Look, guys, I don't think we're going to get any sort of attacks coming into the United Kingdom at all, guys. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think the real threat to the United Kingdom comes from stabby, rammy, Bernie, substation downy. That's where I think the real threat comes to the United Kingdom. I really do. I don't see this. Hang on. Yeah, I don't see this. I don't see this. I don't. It makes no sense, guys. Okay, like somebody asked me the other day. They said, "Sean, can you tell us about this this phantom drone or something, or phantom storm, or I can't remember what it was. I can't remember. Like the phantom weapon." And they said there's a new phantom weapon that's just been used in Ukraine. So I looked and I found this. I found this video on YouTube. And look, you've got to think about the case use for using those sort of things. So I'll use the phantom weapon. So there was a YouTube. I don't know if you guys can remember, but there's a YouTube video going around saying that the Russians have this phantom weapon. And this phantom weapon is undetectable. It doesn't give out any heat signatures. It can't be detected on radar. It's not a drone. And I was thinking, right, fair enough. So it's operating on unknown physics, all right? And then I read the article and it said it took out a bunker in, I think it was like, I can't remember, like somewhere in Ukraine, basically. Okay, so, okay, fair enough. So take all that information in, right? Let's just say let's just say it's true, right? first of all, now we've given the Russians the knowledge that this sort of stuff is possible. So the Russians now know that we've got that weapon. So what was achieved? Well, you took out a bunker. Okay, so we took out a bunker and we let the Russians know we let the Russians know that we can operate outside known physics. So now what happens is you get, R&D escalation. The Russians will get that and they think, oh, right, okay, well, they can do it. Let's figure out how they did it. Let's figure out what we know. So straight away I said, I don't think it's real. I think the article is BS because there's no case use for that. You see where I'm going with that, guys? You're not going to let the bad guys know that you have this fancy secret weapon for the sake of taking out a bunker. It makes no sense. You wouldn't do that. What have you achieved? You've achieved nothing. All you've done is let the Russians know that you have this capability. Now that's the same rationale when we're talking about Russians striking the United Kingdom with missiles. Now there is no case use for it, guys. None. I don't see any case use like where the Russians would take out any targets in the United Kingdom with missiles. There's like the percentage chance is so small, it's not even worth talking about. Poland, on the other hand, Poland is absolutely fair game. In Poland, you've got the biggest military buildup. You've got Poland increasing their military capacity, their factories, their drone factories, their artillery factories, their munitions factories, their tanks, their bombs, their trains, their planes, their automobiles. All that industry is building up, and that's there right on Ukraine's border. So, and again, the airfields as well. I would speculate, and this is just my speculation, guys. I'm speculating that a lot of Ukrainian aircraft are actually being flown from Poland. I used to say Poland or Romania, but I think Poland's the best bet. I don't know if this is happening, guys. I don't know if this is happening. I'm just speculating. Now, if that is true, I don't know if it is. I need to be clear. If that is true and Putin decides to take out those airfields, I think that's totally fair game. I do, guys. I think that's totally fair game. I mean, if you're in a war, what do I always say? If you're in a war, avoid wars at all costs because they're all stupid. They don't make sense. They don't make any sense. But if you're in a war, you need to win it at all costs. And that, the Russians will be trying to win this and the Ukrainians are obviously trying to win this. What does a win mean? I don't know. But this is speculation, but if the Ukrainian F-16s are being flown from Poland and Vladimir Putin takes out these Polish air bases with some sort of long-range missile or whatever, I think they're legitimate targets. I do. They are legitimate targets. Right, Ghost in the Flesh is saying, each central bank sought to dominate its government by its ability to control treasury laws. Right, okay. Ghost in the Flesh. Can you just articulate shortly what you're trying to get at? I mean, I know you're putting a lot of great information on here, but I don't know what it feels like, you're putting a lot of information on here. I mean, you've got 17 points. I mean, I don't. Right, there's a lot of information on there, and I don't have the. Right, I'm. Sorry. Okay. Ghost in the Flesh. You've got a lot of information, and I don't have the. I can't read all this information you're putting down, mate. So, with respect, I'll try and respond. But what are you getting at, Ghost in the Flesh? What are you? What's your end game as such? Ninth Circle rituals. Right. I don't know what the Ninth Circle rituals are, guys. I don't know what the Ninth Circle rituals are. Storm Shadow missiles needed British satellite data for strikes. Yes, they did. The British establishment has already fired at Russian people using third party to pull the trigger. Yeah. So for those of you guys who don't know, the Storm Shadow missile system. So there's a Storm Shadow and there's the the French one called, somebody help me out, Scalp. So the French missile system is called Scalp. It's the same missile system. Now, the Storm Shadow missile system, it runs off the British infrastructure. So, like so many things, you can't just put these things, like nuclear weapons, you can't just put these things in an, you can't just put these things on, shove this thing in a box and it will, and it works. It doesn't work like that. You have to, there's a lot of third-party infrastructure, I guess, to support that. So, for example, the Storm Shadow missile system, the pilot of that Storm Shadow missile system, he has no say where that missile system goes. No say. That missile is pre-programmed on the ground. Now, the reason for this is because they don't want that link to the missile. Also, there's no abort button on that missile. So once you fire that missile, it will go. There's no way to stop it without obviously blowing it out the sky. I think this comes from the Falkland Islands in 1982. The Falkland Islands in 1982, when the British found the code or the radio frequency or whatever it was to destroy the self-destruct radio signal to destroy the Exocet missiles that were being fired at them by the Argentinians. Anyway, so as these weapons have been developed, they've been developed with various levels of sophistication. So, and to operate, look, guys, I've never programmed a Storm Shadow missile, but I would speculate to program a Storm Shadow missile system, you need to have access to British crypto. Now, they may be taking those computer parts out and swapping them over. I don't know. But that certainly does seem the way. And, of course the Russians know this, guys. Of course the Russians know this. Right, somebody's just put something about Donald Trump. Here we are. So Alexander Cameron is saying, breaking, President Trump is to make an announcement to the nation at 2 p.m. That's American time, at the White House, comes immediately after his scheduled cabinet meeting. Look, I remember the last time we had a Trump, we did a Donald Trump, we did a Donald Trump meeting, or we did a Donald Trump, go on. The last time we had a Donald Trump live stream and we was live streaming his thing, he came out and he was talking about just something ridiculous. I think he was talking about that fat loss drug or something. Did he say you can get a Ozempic now and it's free or something? I don't know. So I'm not going to take much. I'm not going to take much of that. Balloon incursions are hybrid attacks on Lithuanians' airspace, says EU as it summons Belarus. Okay, so when okay, guys, so just to put things in context, these are big balloons, not little party balloons that you blow up for your kid's birthday. These are big balloons, and they can take maybe I don't know. That guy was that guy Felix Baumberger or something. He did the highest parachute jump, and it was right on the edge of space, and that was out of a balloon. So they can take up quite heavy payloads, these balloons, and they can go very high. So they could be a very cheap satellite. Band again is saying apparently the Donbass region alone has more minerals and rare earth than the whole of the rest of Europe put together, worth an estimated 7 trillion. Yeah, when I was in Donbass in can't remember what year it was. I was sat there, right? I was sat there in the a railway crossing. So I was sat there at this railway crossing in Donbass. And this freight train, guys, if you've ever seen Soviet, Russian freight trains, they're just bigger. They're like European freight train, but bigger. They're huge. They're a lot bigger. So I'm sat there with my interpreter who was driving. I said, Zhenya? He said, yes. I said, what's in that, mate? He said, oh, it's coal. I said, oh. I said, where's it going? He said, Russia. I said, what do you mean? He said, they're stealing it. I said, well, all of those are filled with, and like the amount of coal that the Russians were taking out of the Donbass, absolutely phenomenal, you know. And that, you know, that's just coal, you know. So you can imagine the other, you know, earth materials, the uranium, the lithium, the cobalt. Slim is saying Donald Trump is the world's most powerful troll. Oh, hang on a minute. What's? Yeah, so this whole thing with David Lammy, guys, listen, we knew it was going to get, I'll come on to the United Kingdom now. So we knew it was going to get bad with David Lammy, didn't we? Like the worst thing in all this, I think, is removing the trial by jury. And David Lammy's doing that. Let's not pretend, though, guys, ladies and gentlemen, let's not pretend that David Lammy's in charge. He's doing what he's told. You know, he's doing what he's told. But Debbie Dooms is saying the Strand is reporting jail chaos. 12 more prisoners released by mistake in weeks as 2 still on the run, says David Lammy. If only we could keep these prisoners in jail. Only we could keep these prisoners in jail. Right, let me jump onto a few... Yeah, guys, I said this at the beginning of the live stream. If you are working in the United Kingdom right now, you need to achieve £71,000 per year to match the income of somebody that's not working and that has 3 children. That's what Kemi Badenoch is reporting as of yesterday. So, you know, I think that's, you know, that is a phenomenal, you know, I mean, why would you work in the United Kingdom? Like, if you've got 3 kids and you're looking at a job, if it pays less than £71,000, there's no point doing it. There's no point doing it. Literally no point doing it. No point. No point doing it. What else have we got? We have got I'm gonna show you guys a Tommy Robinson video. I'm not gonna play it all. I'm not gonna play it all for you guys, but I'm gonna share with you guys a Tommy Robinson video real quick.
Have to put this on.
Now, look, guys, I'm not certainly not being negative to like Tommy or his movement. He's done things that I couldn't, dream of. I just want to let's just listen to this for a second, and I'll come back onto I'll just give my comments on this.
Quick good morning. Yeah. My question is, will you be in London for the biggest carol service this country's seen? And you know what? This is the first year. We shouldn't have to put this on. There should be a Christmas carol service. There should be a massive Christmas event put on by our government. Did you see Poland's this year? Did you see Poland's Christmas market switch on? All the lights all lit in the colours of their country, the celebration, everyone in their capital city coming out for it. We want that, yeah?
He's absolutely right. I want that. I think the country wants that. We don't get that. I think we should have that. He's 100% right.
Well, this is the first year we're going to organise it within 4 weeks, unite the kingdom, put the Christ back into Christmas. Let's start focusing on our days. It's the first year. Wait till next year, the year after. We're going to do it every year. People will end up travelling from around the globe to our Christmas event. Guaranteed. Yeah? This is the first year. Please come along. It's not a protest. It's not against anything. It's literally a celebration of Christ, a celebration of Christmas, a celebration of Christianity. Music, gospel bands, musicians, opera singers. We are going to have it all. It's going to be a beautiful.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. You guys can get the gist. I'm just conscious of the time. So all these things where people are, where people are coming together and they're, and there's this big march to London, or there's this big march here, or there's masses of people there, kind of misses the point, guys. It's not going to change anything. Nothing's going to change. We're still going to have thousands of migrants coming over the borders. We're still going to have our young girls running scared. So all these things, I totally get them. But I just think people are focusing on the condiments when the oven's not turned on. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? People are focusing on what condiments they're going to have on their dinner, but they don't even have any dinner. Oh, let's get some ketchup. Let's get some tomatoes. Let's get some brown sauce. Let's get some barbecue sauce. Oh, let's get some rock salt. People are focusing on the condiments, the peripherals, when the main problem with all of this crazy stuff that's happening at the moment is we don't, in the United Kingdom, have a legal framework to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. And might I say, we don't have a legal framework to protect ourselves from this type of person. Those of you guys, look at that, guys. Are you terrified? I'm terrified. I am terrified. So look, guys, I've said this quite a few times. When these Free Palestine protesters meet the Muslims, the real Muslims, these guys are going to be the first casualties. These guys are going to be the first casualties, and they're going to have no idea what's hit them. Who's that? Like, what's he got? Is he still worried about COVID? The same KFC. Chicken wings from KFC. Chicken from KFC. So there you are, guys. These people are going to be the first casualties. And I think that's in Sheffield. And I was looking at this and I was thinking, how have we descended into this? Like, how have we descended into this? And listen, guys, I like the new chant. Chicken wings from KFC. I like that. I like the new chant. Chicken wings from KFC. Right, let me It's this day I realized the nation was completely funked. I was non-religious left-winger and I noticed this double standards, and I became right-wing shortly after. KK is saying, will AI be doing the job of juries? I don't know. I don't think that's a good thing. I really don't think that's a good thing. But then I don't know where we're going with this, guys. Here in the United Kingdom, if you don't know, we're getting rid of, in the United Kingdom very soon, I think, the government either have proposed to get rid of trial by jury. So now if you're accused of a crime, you won't be convicted by a jury. You'll be convicted by a single judge. They are going to keep trial by jury for I think, murder, like murder. It's definitely murder. I think it's rape as well, and maybe manslaughter or something. But for everything else, it's just going to be trial by one judge, which I do think has massive areas for it just going absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. Timsky saying morning all. Morning, Timsky. You're almost at the end. Timsky. Okay, listen, guys, I am going to will you still get a defense lawyer? You might get a defense AI. They might give you a defense AI. Listen, guys, I'm going to give a quick rundown of what I've been talking about on this live stream. It's been confirmed. NATO first strike options, NATO preemptive strike options are on the table now. NATO chiefs, the Italian admiral, they're talking about it in interviews. The Russians have responded. The Russians have responded by saying any what's her name, Maria Maria. I want to say it's not Maria Zaruka. Basically, the Russians have responded saying, any preemptive strike by NATO will warrant a response, and that response could be nuclear. Big old Vladimir Putin's come out and he said, if anybody attacks Russia, they will be annihilated. So look, guys, well, people are, there's a lot of words at the moment about nuclear weapons, nuclear war. Vladimir Putin's got the world's biggest nuclear stockpile. I don't think he has. If you have a scrapyard, you have 100 cars, but they don't work, but you still have 100 cars. That's where I think the Russians are. Before anyone, I don't think nuclear weapons are ever going to be used. There's no case use. If this does happen, guys, and I'll reevaluate this if this happens, but if nuclear weapons start to be tested by the Russians, by the Americans, by the French, by the British, whoever, if that happens, I will reconsider my thoughts, but I don't think anybody's going to be lobbing nuclear weapons anytime soon. I think my opinion would be that World War III will start by accident. It will be an accidental. It will be a miscalculation. It will be an overcalculation, an undercalculation. It will be a lost pilot, a genuinely lost pilot. His GPS has been jammed by the Ukrainians, or he's had some ground attack and his module doesn't work. So he's had to come low. To find some ground references, and somebody takes him out the sky, genuinely mistakes, because now the invocation of Article 4, lots of countries have done that. They will have that framework to put in place. So I do think World War III will start by accident, guys. It has been confirmed. There are nuclear options on the table. But anyway, guys, I am going to close this down now. I'm going to close this live stream down now. I will be back on. If I'm not back on again in the afternoon, if I'm not back on in the, oh, sorry, Donna, right, sorry. Yeah, Donna, sorry. Sorry. Let me, sorry, Donna, you're right. I totally forgot. Let me get this. So my friend sent me a message. Hang on, give me a second. Right. Let me just Google this. Okay, so this was from 1 hour ago. I'll share it with you guys, actually. I'll share it with you. So this was from 1 hour ago. My friend in Ukraine just sent me this. Sorry about that. British national arrested for involvement in killings of Ukrainian politicians on Russia's orders. Ukraine Security Service counterintelligence, together with British intelligence agencies, has exposed British citizen Ross David Cutmore, who was carrying out assignments for Russian Special Services 24-25. Sources told the SBU, yeah, so he's been a bad man, basically. According to the source, had arrived in Ukraine 24 as an instructor to help train military personnel. He possessed combat experience, gained during his military service, and participations in operations in the Middle East. Yeah, that's what he sent me. That's what he sent me. So, this is all part of asymmetric warfare, non-conventional warfare, turning people into spies, turning people into counter agents. This is all the sort of stuff that happens. You know, all this sort of stuff happens. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to close this down now. You guys have been fantastic. You've been really good looking. Make sure that if you're on, guys, you've liked, comment, subscribed, and all those things that help this channel grow, guys. Buttons down there, the subscribe, or up there on X, or if you're watching on Twitch, we're somewhere on Twitch as well. Anyway, guys, I'll speak to you guys later. I'll be back on at 8 if I'm not on in the afternoon.